We'll review different types and functions of joints. So first of all, a joint is where two or more bones meet. Usually two, but there are some cases where there are more than two. They're usually named for the bones that make up the joint. For example, the patellofemoral joint is the joint between the patella and the femur. Or you have the tibiofibular joint, which is the joint between the tibia and the fibula, or the metacarpal phalangeal joint, which is the joint between your metacarpal and your first phalange or your proximal phalange. Joints are also called articulations. Joints have many functions, including binding the parts of the skeletal system, holding them together, making bone growth possible because the epiphyseal plates are very close to the joints, permitting change in shape during childbirth, for example, in the hips of the mother or in the skull of the infant, and probably most familiarly, they enable the body to move when muscles contract. How much do joints move? Some joints move a lot. These are diarthrotic joints. Amphiarthrotic joints move just a little, and synarthrotic joints don't move at all. We can also classify joints by the type of tissue that connects them. We have fibrous joints, cartilaginous joints, and synovial joints. Fibrous joints are joints that are held together by a thin layer of dense connective tissue. They're held very tightly together, and they have just a tiny bit of movement, if any, or not at all. Examples include the suture of the skull and the distal tibiofibular joint as pictured here. So if you look here, you can see this is the fibula, this is the tibia, this is the ankle joint, this is the knee joint, but this part right here is where those two bones meet, the distal tibiofibular joint. Your actual ankle that moves is down here. These bones don't move, or don't move very much. When you take a step, it puts stress on that ligament, which is injured in a high ankle sprain, but usually this joint does not move. Next, you have cartilaginous joints. In these joints, bones are connected by cartilage, whether hyaline or fibrocartilage. In the example shown here, you have the vertebrae that are connected by intervertebral discs that sit between the body of each vertebrae, and then you have ligaments that run all up the posterior side. The joint in between your hip bones, your pelvic bones, is called the pubic symphysis, and that expands during childbirth. That is also a cartilaginous joint. Finally, you have synovial joints. Synovial joints make up most of our joints in our body, and they are responsible for all directions of movement. There are 6 classifications of synovial joints, which I'll show you on the next slide. But in this joint, you have the ends of the bone surrounded by a joint capsule that's made up of ligament and is lined with a synovial membrane. The synovial membrane secretes a synovial fluid to help the bone glide smoothly. Also, the ends of each of these bones are covered in hyaline cartilage or articular cartilage, which contribute, again, to the joint gliding smoothly. So here we have the 6 classifications of synovial joints. While I'm not going to go through each of these 6 classifications, the shape of the joint largely determines the direction of movement of the joint. For example, a ball and socket joint has all 360 degrees, or I guess not quite 360 degrees because you can't necessarily, most people can't put their hip up over their head or their foot up over their head, but this can move in a wide range of motions. Condylar joints are flexion and extension, so they move back and forth. There's a little movement side to side, but in like a hinge joint, they just move back and forth, flexion and extension. Pivot joints will rotate, and plane joints slide. Saddle joints have a wider range of motion, kind of similar to a ball and socket joint. So again, the shape of the joint will dictate the directions in which the bones can move. So that is a quick overview of joints.